Hi, it's Ann. How I travel to Europe for less, budget hacks, packing tips, and money saving secrets. It's what we all need. A lot of people dream about traveling to Europe or even moving abroad one day, but they assume the cost is completely out of reach. They look at flights that cost 1,000, 1,500 USD or more and think, maybe Europe is just unrealistic for me. But after spending time living and traveling in Europe, I've learned international travel does not have to cost a fortune. You just have to know where to look, what mistakes to avoid, and how to make smarter choices. In this video, I'm going to share how I find cheaper flights to Europe, how I use budget airlines, how I pack so I can actually move around European cities easily, how I save money once I arrive, and some lessons I've learned traveling internationally. Make sure you stay until the end because I'm going to share one of the biggest mistakes I see people make when trying to save money traveling in Europe. And if you're someone who travels with a pet, I'll also share some important things you need to know before booking your flight because there are details that can create expensive problems if you don't plan ahead. Because budget travel isn't about sacrificing the experience, it's about making smarter decisions. Chapter 1: Stop searching for flights the way everyone else does. One of the biggest mistakes people make when traveling to Europe is only searching for flights in their hometown airport. They put their departure city, look for major airlines, and assume whatever price they see is what they'll have to pay. But sometimes the cheapest way to Europe is not the most obvious way. Instead of asking, how do I fly from my hometown to Europe? I ask, what is the least expensive way I can get myself to Europe? Those are two very different questions. Sometimes that means taking a smaller domestic flight to a major international gateway and continuing from there. Chapter 2: The Allegiant and French Bee Budget Flight Strategy. One strategy I've used is combining a low-cost domestic carrier like Allegiant with a European budget carrier like the French Bee. For example, you might fly Allegiant to get to a gateway city like Miami or New York, and then connect internationally from there. This extra step can save hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. French Bee is a French low-cost airline that flies between the United States and France. Now, when you hear budget airline, understand what this means. You're not paying for luxury extras. You're paying for transportation. And honestly, that's exactly what most travelers need. If you book in advance and have flexibility with your dates, you can sometimes find fares around 135 euros. The equivalent price in US dollars might be 150 USD depending on when you check the exchange rates. But the important point is, a trip to Europe does not always have to start with a $1,000 plus plane ticket. Sometimes you just need to look at different options. Chapter 3: The Overnight Hotel Trick that can save you money. Another mistake people make is trying to create the perfect itinerary. They want to leave their home airport and arrive in Europe on the same day with no inconvenience. The convenience usually costs money. Sometimes the cheapest option is take the cheaper flight. If necessary, spend one night in a budget hotel and then continue your journey the next day. Even after paying for the hotel, you may still save significantly compared with choosing the most convenient option. Flexibility is one of the biggest money-saving tools you have. Chapter 4: How to avoid the hidden costs of budget airlines. Budget airlines can save you a lot of money, but you have to understand how they work. Many low-cost airlines make their money by charging separately for extras. Checked bags, seat selection, food, drinks, snacks. Those small purchases add up quickly. One of my biggest tips is bring your own food. I never rely on buying meals or snacks on a plane. I pack food that travels well and that I know I'll enjoy. It saves money and it means I'm not paying inflated airline prices. Also, always check the baggage rules before booking. A cheap ticket with expensive baggage fees may not actually be the cheapest option. Chapter 5: Pack so you can walk. One of my favorite ways to save money in Europe is walking. Many European cities are incredibly walkable, and some of the best experiences happen when you slow down and explore on foot. But walking means you need luggage that works for you. I use an Osprey backpack system because it gives me flexibility. My carry-on and personal items can zip together, which makes it easier to move through airports, train stations, and over the European cobblestones. Then when I need to, I can separate them. One becomes my carry-on bag, the other one becomes my personal item. This setup is especially helpful because you're not dragging a roller suitcase everywhere you go. You can move through crowded train stations, walk across uneven streets, and get from your arrival point to your accommodation without automatically needing a taxi. And if you're traveling with a dog, having your hands free is a huge advantage. Trying to pull a suitcase over cobblestones while managing luggage and a leash can become exhausting very quickly. Now, one important disclaimer: always check the exact airline you're flying with before you travel. Every airline has its maximum measurements and weight limits for carry on bags and personal items, and those rules can change. My personal setup has worked for me on every airline I've flown so far, both in the United States and in Europe. But I'm not going to say it'll work for every airline forever. Always do your homework before you fly, so you know your bags meet the airline's requirements. I'll link the exact backpack setup that I use, the specific Osprey bags, and combination that allow me to have both a carry on and personal item that work together. That way, if you're interested in creating a similar setup, you can see exactly what I'm using rather than trying to figure it out from scratch. Packing lighter doesn't just save money, it gives you freedom. If you're finding these tips helpful, this is a great time to subscribe. Here on this channel, I share exactly what it is really like to build a life overseas, the practical details, the challenges, the things nobody else tells you before you go, and how to make international living more realistic. So if you're interested in travel, moving abroad, and creating a different kind of life, consider subscribing because I have a lot more videos coming. Now let's talk about how to save money once you actually arrive in Europe. Chapter 6: How to Travel Around Europe Without Blowing Your Budget. Getting to Europe cheaply is half the battle. The next question is, once you arrive, how do you actually get around without spending a fortune? A lot of people assume trains are always the cheapest option in Europe, and sometimes they are. But sometimes train travel can actually become expensive, especially if you're booking last minute or traveling long distances. So I always compare my options. If you're flying from the United States into France, chances are you'll arrive in Paris. And honestly, Paris is one of the best transportation hubs in Europe. From Paris, you can connect by train to almost anywhere in France. The train system is convenient, comfortable, and especially helpful if you're traveling with a dog because pets are much easier to manage on trains than on airplanes. A dog ticket in France is typically around €10, which is dramatically cheaper than paying airline pet fees. If you plan on doing a lot of train travel in France, get into the SNCF discount cards. The card Advantage is often the most useful option for many leisure travelers. It costs around €49 per year and can provide discounts on many longer distance train journeys. There are different versions depending on age. There's the card Advantage Jeune, which I think is for little people. I don't know the exact age limit on that. Card Advantage Adult and Card Advantage Senior. However, remember, the card does not mean every ticket will automatically be cheaper. Always compare the final price. For people who travel frequently, there's also the card Liberté, but it is designed for regular travelers and may not make financial sense for the typical vacation. A tip about when to take trains. One thing I learned when traveling in France: I try not to rely on the last train of the day, especially regional TER trains. They can be affected by previous delays, maintenance, track repairs, or other cancellations. If possible, I prefer morning trains and early afternoon trains. If you have to take a late train, always have a backup plan. Know what hotels are nearby. Know what you'll do if your connection is canceled, because sometimes the cheapest transportation option can become expensive if you suddenly need an emergency overnight stay. Chapter 7: The budget travel option many people forget: buses in France. One of the biggest budget travel secrets I learned in France is that buses can sometimes save you a surprising amount of money. A lot of travelers automatically look at trains because France has such an excellent rail system, and trains are wonderful. They are fast, comfortable, and convenient. But if you're traveling on a strict budget and you have flexibility with your schedule, don't overlook the buses. Long distance bus companies such as Flixbus and BlaBlaCar Bus connect to many cities throughout France and Europe. And you can sometimes find incredibly inexpensive fares if you book early. Sometimes a bus ticket can cost just a few euros. The trade off is time. A bus journey will usually take longer than a high speed train. But if you're not in a hurry, that extra travel time can save a significant amount of money. And if you're traveling through multiple cities, those savings can really add up. However, there's one important thing to consider. If you're traveling with a pet or a service dog, buses are not usually going to be the easiest option. Pet policies vary, but many long distance bus companies have more restrictions when it comes to animals. That's why, in my experience, if you're traveling internationally with a pet or a service animal, you will usually have an easier experience choosing either train travel or air travel. Trains are especially convenient because pets are often accepted, pet tickets are usually inexpensive, and you'll have more flexibility during your journey. So, when deciding how to get around Europe, think about your specific situation. Traveling alone with a backpack and a flexible schedule, a bus might be your cheapest option. Traveling a long distance without your pet, compare buses, trains, and flights. Traveling with a pet or service animal, a train or flight will usually be the better choice. Chapter 8. Sometimes flying within Europe is cheaper than taking the train. Here's something that surprises many people. Sometimes flying within Europe is actually cheaper than taking the train. If you're traveling a long distance and you're not traveling with a pet, always compare your options. Budget airlines can sometimes have incredibly low fares. You might find flights for around 45 euros one way, depending on the route, the season, and how early you book. Check out the low-cost carriers such as Transavia, France, EasyJet, and Ryanair. Different countries have different low-cost options. The important thing is not assuming one method is always cheaper. Compare. A train may be more convenient, a bus may be the cheapest, a flight might be faster. The best choice depends on your situation. Chapter 9. Where you stay can save you money. One of my favorite budget tricks is choosing your accommodation based on transportation. Where you stay can have a huge impact on your total travel cost. If possible, I stay within walking distance to the train station. If I'm traveling with just a backpack, I like to be about 15 or 20 minutes walk away. If I'm pulling luggage, I prefer something much closer, ideally around a 5-minute walk. This saves money because you don't actually need a taxi every time you arrive somewhere. And honestly, it makes travel much less stressful. Trying to drag luggage over European cobblestones while navigating a new city is not a fun experience. However, there is one important warning. Not every train station neighborhood is somewhere you'd want to stay. Some station areas can have higher crime rates, especially after dark. Before booking a hotel or rental, research the neighborhood. Look at recent reviews, see what travelers are saying about walking there at night. Convenience matters, but safety comes first. And if at all possible, arrive during daylight hours, anytime you're arriving somewhere new. It's much safer all around. Chapter 10. Getting around town for less. Once I arrive somewhere, I walk whenever possible. Walking saves money, but it also allows you to experience a place differently. You notice the neighborhoods, cafes, markets, and small details that you would miss rushing from one destination to another. When I need transportation, I compare my options. In many European cities, Bolt can often be less expensive than Uber. If you're traveling with a dog, check for Bolt Pet or Uber Pet. If you don't see a pet option, you can usually book the ride and immediately message the driver. I explain that I'm traveling with a small dog and a carrier and let them know they can cancel if they're not comfortable. Most drivers are very accommodating when you communicate clearly. Sometimes a driver may ask for a little extra tip if they're accepting a pet, even though they do not officially offer a pet option. The biggest thing is communication. Don't surprise your driver when they arrive. Chapter 11. This is the bonus chapter, traveling internationally with the pets. This chapter is specifically for those of you who want to travel internationally with an animal. Many people have asked me how I manage international travel with my miniature poodle. One reason I like French Bee is they allow small pets in the cabin. But you have to plan ahead. Your pet carrier must be soft-sided and fit under the seat. The maximum carrier dimensions are 43 centimeters by 35 centimeters by 20 centimeters. For Americans, that equals 17 inches by 13.7 inches by 7.8 inches. The combined weight of your pet and carrier cannot exceed 8 kilograms, which is approximately 17.6 pounds for Americans. You also need to include the pet fee when calculating your total travel budget. Remember, your pet carrier counts as your personal item, so you cannot assume that you can bring your pet carrier, your carry-on bag, and another personal bag. You need to pack strategically. With my current setup, traveling with a pet would cause me to have to check my carry-on bag for an additional fee. If you can combine all items into your carry-on, you can avoid this. Another small trick I've used is utilizing the pockets in my pet carrier for essentials, or you can purchase a neck pillow and storage combo. I will link to this. It's a great way to get extras past security. Chapter 12, Service Dogs and International Travel. If you travel with a legitimate service dog, understand the international rules vary significantly. A service dog is not treated the same way as a pet in many situations. However, each country has its own definition and requirements. France has a much narrower recognition of assistance dogs than Americans expect. France primarily recognizes assistance dogs for certain disabilities, including blindness and epilepsy. If your service dog is for another condition, you might need to travel under pet rules in France. Other European countries have their own requirements, so always check the specific country you're visiting. For French Bee, you need to arrange service animal travel in advance. You might need airline approval, service animal transportation forms, veterinary records, microchip information, vaccination documentation, required import documents depending on your route. There will be an attestation form stating that your dog will not need to use the bathroom during the flight, or explaining your plan if an emergency occurs. Never wait until the airport. Plan ahead. Contact the airline before your trip and make sure everything is approved. One thing I will say from my own experience, I've had a positive experience flying French Bee with my dog. They were kind, professional, and accepting. However, smaller European airlines can sometimes have very specific requirements for assistance animals, and those requirements can be difficult to meet. I would avoid them if at all possible. Always research before booking. Chapter 13, the real secret to budget travel. The biggest lesson I've learned is that budget travel is not one single trick. It's a series of small decisions: choosing the right airport, being flexible with dates, using budget airlines, packing strategically, walking whenever possible, comparing trains, buses, and flights, choosing your accommodation carefully, planning ahead. Those small choices add up, and they can save you thousands of dollars while making your trip more enjoyable. The goal is not to make your trip miserable by cutting every possible expense. The goal is to spend money where it actually matters. Maybe that means enjoying a beautiful meal, visiting a museum, taking a special excursion, or simply having more time in the place you dreamed of visiting. Budget travel is about creating more freedom. If you've been dreaming about traveling to Europe, but the cost has been holding you back, I hope this video showed you there are more options than you might have thought. You don't have to travel in luxury to have an amazing experience. Sometimes the best adventure comes from being flexible, slowing down, learning how to do things differently. I'd love to know, what is your favorite budget travel tip? Share it in the comments, because I'm always looking for new ways to make international travel more affordable. And if you want more videos about moving abroad, traveling internationally, and creating a life overseas, make sure you've subscribed. I'll see you in the next video. Sending love from the United States.